Welcome to Fuller Speed Ahead. I'm Craig Fuller here with Tom Balzer, the President and CEO of the Ohio Trucking Association. We're at your Cleveland conference. This is your annual state conference where you bring folks together. Why are they coming and what are they hoping to learn and get out of the conference?
Well, the conference is something we do every year, and we take a lot of time to make sure that we give the attendees the tools necessary to advance their business. And so this year's focus has been really about the economy and what we see coming forward in freight moving into the next couple of years, because we had a lot of interesting scenarios happen in 2018, and then that kind of settled down in 2019. So we really wanted to refocus everyone's efforts in forecasting well and getting them the best data they could to use for their business.
And what's the sentiment right now? Is it positive, negative, stressful? What is the general sentiment?
I think the general sentiment is tentative. I think people are doing well, but I think that the Q1 and Q2 put a pretty big scare in the industry based off of what they saw in 2018. So they're kind of a little bit tentative, and they want to make sure that there's some reassurance in how freight markets are moving forward and what they look like as far as rates being able to sustain some of the changes that they made in 2018.
Your association represents carriers of all sizes. So you have some very small trucking companies. What's the smallest carrier that's a member?
We actually have a carrier who has one truck.
Okay.
It's a member of ours. And then we go up to fleets that are 7,000 and greater. So the vast majority of our members are in that 1 to 20 truck fleet, which is very consistent with the industry as a whole. So our membership is very indicative of what the industry represents as far as fleet size.
There's a lot of stress with particularly the smaller guys that feel like they're oftentimes left out of there's this theory that there's this dark room where all the decisions are made and they don't get to participate. How do you guys give them a voice in the industry so that they feel that they have a say in how the industry's ran?
So we're very active in soliciting feedback from our members. So we do a survey every year to members to talk about issues, to talk about what sort of things that they're dealing with, as well as when we make decisions like policy decisions. We have a committee, but we also go out to the membership and ask just like 1-question surveys, 3-question surveys that are specific to an issue to make sure that we get a good understanding. And one example of that is when the FMCSA was looking at the speed limiter piece, was we wanted to get a good feel at that moment, because we had not asked that question in probably over a decade of, is a speed limiter something that they would be interested in supporting or not supporting? And when we sent that out, we had really no idea what the sentiment was going to be coming back. And it was resoundingly clear of what the association members did. The board adopted a policy based on that 3-question survey, consistent with what the members wanted.
And what was that result?
The result was that we did not feel that the federal government needed to get involved in that decision, in the speed limiter decision, because that was a fleet-by-fleet basis, that there was a business decision being made by specific fleets on the speed limiter piece, and that it was not the government's responsibility to take that business decision on as their own.
Now, another topic that gets a lot of conversation is around hair follicle testing and drug testing. I'm curious, what is the feedback from your membership? How do they want you guys to think about that?
Well, there's 2 really big pieces when it comes to hair testing. One of which is there is the double payment, meaning the federal government has 2 specific types of testing that's allowable, but there are companies that choose to do hair follicle testing because it's a deeper dive. And they're paying for twice. They're paying for the hair follicle testing, plus then they're paying for urinalysis or blood testing to be able to qualify on the federal side. So that's one side of it. Is the reason they want hair follicle testing to be allowed is you're not going to be double paying for those tests. The flip side of that is very challenging is that when we get into litigation with trial attorneys is they will ask any question in the world they can to make you look bad. And the question is if you are a business that you choose to do urinalysis and that's just your standard, that the question's going to come up is, well, hair follicle testing is this new testing that allows you to make this deeper dive. Why didn't you do that testing? And the response being, well, it costs more, is a really difficult defense to put into place. So there's this really kind of fine line that the members are struggling with is, yes, we want to be able to allow hair follicle testing for those companies who wanted to use that, but on the flip side, there is also this litigation fear that we as an industry aren't doing enough to do the proper drug testing procedures in place because we're not using that highest level of service. So would in a trial scenario, would you be in a disadvantaged position because you're not doing hair follicle testing because that's there?
It always strikes me interesting when safety regulations come up that impact. There's two sides of safety regulations. There's the element of improving safety, which I think everybody in the industry is subscribes to for the most part. Folks really want to push this forward, and I think regardless of their political leanings, that's something that everyone sort of believes in. There's the other side of there's the economic element when you implement those regulations that actually restricts the capacity in the industry. And I'm wondering when it comes to hair follicle testing, if you take Lane Kidd's assessment that as much as 10% of the industry may fail a drug test, I'm curious, does that mean that if you were to implement that would actually restrict capacity? Wouldn't that be a good thing at the end of the day?
Well, I mean, I think it is. Without question, safety is paramount in the industry. It's something that everybody strives for. It's everybody that looks at, whether it be, insurance claims or litigation or something, that there is a definite cost benefit to investing in safety, without question. The flip side of that is that you also have to protect yourself from potential litigation and from the nuclear hit that always seems to be hanging out there, so you have to assess that. The idea that you make these decisions based on what's the best available out there is something that everybody strives for, but then there's also, like you said, the economic decision of, is it economically viable? Do you need that level of service, or do you feel that your hiring practices and your testing practices are in place that you feel very comfortable in making that decision? And every company's got to make that call.
How does our industry deal with this sort of runaway lawsuits that they end up getting subjected to? Because ultimately, there are days that I'm having a bad day. I consider myself a safe driver, but I do get tired, things happen, stress at home. But these lawsuits are, 50, 75, 100 million. We saw one I think it was a month ago, it was 300 million in the state of Georgia. How does the industry really deal with these issues? It seems like there's very few companies that can pay these types of lawsuits.
And I wholeheartedly agree. And that's one debate that we get in with, the increase of insurance limits. That debate has been raging for a while. When Ann Farrow was the administrator of the FMCSA, her and I had many arguments about that piece. Is that what we're seeing is there's two different kinds of lawsuits. There's that lawsuit that is, your insurance limit is $1 million, so we're going to sue you for $999,000. And then the flip side of it is they go all out. Mm-hmm. And the challenge that comes to that is it is that jury of your peers that makes that determination, and the lack of understanding of the industry, the lack of understanding of the safety things that we have in place, and the environment that we run in that we are seeing, and the industry talks about 80% of the accidents are caused by the passenger vehicle. And when that study came out, that was before the issuance of a lot of the distracted driving, and it was before texting even existed. So, yeah, the nuclear payouts that come with these lawsuits could be extremely monumental. And the unfortunate part is that they always look at the deep pockets and how deep can they get to those folks, and so you're not seeing those asks of those. That litigation being on the smaller carrier because they don't have the money for it, right? But what you're seeing is you have these large carriers out there and these private fleets out there that have deep pockets, that those are the people that are really getting pounded on these things because they're out there, but it also then sets that precedent that will trickle down into some of these mid-sized carriers who will bankrupt them if they ever get in that scenario. So,
I think, oftentimes juries or trial lawyers have a tendency to drive out the worst experience someone's had with a truck driver on the road and paint the picture that all drivers are that way or the company's negligent, when oftentimes it isn't that way. Oftentimes these rewards are just so big that the companies end up settling them because they don't have a choice but to do so.
Right, yeah, and then they've got to make those decisions based on those those cases. And the worst part is you have businesses that are great businesses, and everybody protects against that, and everybody makes that decision. And I remember when I was with a trucking company where we were redoing their insurance limits. This company was $100 million in revenue, owned millions of dollars worth of property, and we had $5 million worth of insurance limit. And the owner's response was, well, if that's the number they're going to sue you for. And that was the case at one point. But I think today they're going to throw everything against.
Larger.
Yeah, I mean, and then that's something that they ask for the biggest number they possibly can, and then they negotiate on their way back down. And so that's the challenge is that the unfortunate part in this is it's no longer about finding a number that will mitigate the accident, or finding a number that will put a financial number to what the actual loss is. It's now all this big negotiation, and they're going to try to get as much as they possibly can. So they're going to put out the biggest number they can, no matter how ridiculous. And that's the thing. I think everybody sees the ask, right, and they think it's laughable. But the problem is they're getting that.
Yeah, for sure. And many times these trial lawyers, they're competitive by nature. It's how do they top the next guy? But that's scary for our industry, because you think about the fact that these lawsuits, there doesn't seem to be a limit in certain states where they just have the ability to ask for these substantial numbers, and the industry is subject to it. And oftentimes it's not the driver's fault, and it's oftentimes not the carrier's negligence, but to a jury of your peers or not your peers, it appears that way, and that's the difficult task.
Well, the interesting part, I mean, two parts of that is the attorney's being paid on a percentage of the win, right? So that if you want to mitigate that, I think that's something you can do. But there again, we also know the political environment of trying to go against the trial attorneys is to be able to say that. But that's one part of it, and the other part is that the difficult part is how do you monetize life?
Yeah, for sure.
And that's the piece that's really difficult. That's a hard argument to make that says, oh, this life is only worth X, and that's a no-win proposition. That's just an argument you can't win.
Yeah, I guess the message of the industry is, you're held accountable by the last mile, not all the miles you've ran, and so keep that in mind as you think about safety, implementation, compliance. Do the best you can to prevent those, because really it's 1 mile away from a serious payout if you're not careful, and frankly serious repercussions in terms of life and safety if you're not careful. So.
Right, and then I think that's the importance of having that safety culture, and developing that, and making sure that your drivers, that your dock workers, that everyone involved with that freight from tip to tail understands the importance and of their job to making sure that the highways are safe, that the workplace is safe, that you really need to invest in that safety culture, and that's really the highly important piece, that everyone understands that from the start to the finish.
Now, moving on to the economy, it's been a topic of this. Ohio is a lot of exposure to auto. There was a large trucking company, Falcon, that shut down this year that was based in Ohio. I'm curious, as the auto industry evolves and their models change, how does the state of Ohio and frankly the trucking industry deal with some of these macro changes?
Yeah, I mean, when you take a look at Ohio's economy, it's still growing. Things are still moving along, even though we've had some significant closures of manufacturing in the area. But it's evolving into different types of technologies and different types of industries. And I think that that's important for the trucking industry to understand, is the type of freight you're hauling today may not be the type of freight you're hauling in 5 years, that you need to be nimble in the types of freight you are. And I think that's where you see, in the case of Falcon, is that's all they hauled. That was it.
Yeah.
They had one client. And the thing is when you have that scenario where you have all your eggs in one basket, that you are going to put yourself into a situation where if that big thing happens, like that closure, that you're out, it's over and done with. And there were also some moves with that particular company that were indicative of, hey, things may not be going well. So the closure was, I think, the last straw in that hat. But there's also some pieces that are there. But I think from the industry's perspective, and that's what we're talking about a lot today, is how does this economy evolve, and what's the next big thing, and how does freight fill that void? Is to making sure that you're nimble, and that yes, you may have a hallmark client, but you have to also be aware that that hallmark client may not be there the next year or may not be there 5 years from now. So what's your backup?
Yeah, I know a lot of carriers last year were told by shippers, take care of me when times are tight. When I need capacity, I'll take care of you on the downside. I think from what I've heard is a lot of those carriers, the shippers did not reciprocate. The traffic manager that was in the business last year may not be the traffic manager this year. And
without question, and there again, that's the interesting play that everybody makes, is everyone's in it for their best interest.
It's a pendulum. The pendulum swung in somebody else's favor.
And somebody takes advantage of it. And there again, these shippers also have, numbers that they have to meet. They have boards of directors, they have investors, they have people that are there, and any way that they can find cost savings, they will. And so that's the thing is yes, it is a relationship-based business. And I think, you take a look at 2018, everyone wanted to be a shipper of choice, right? They just went after that, and what can we do to help out? And, and then all of a sudden now, today, we're back to the drivers can't use the bathroom anymore, right? So I think that's the piece that we need to be aware of is that, yes, there is those clients that you work with that you have to develop that relationship and you continue to work those, and those are the folks you really want. But there's always somebody out there that's gonna take that load for less than you are willing to take it for. They're always able to find somebody, and some of those shippers are going to take advantage of that as best they can.
Yeah, for sure. I think keeping aware of what's happening, knowing where the market's at, using data, and like you said, not having all of your eggs in a single basket or a very few baskets is really important.
Well, and I think that's the important part about the work that you all do is that, and I've said this for years, is we went from an industry that had very little data to now an industry that's got so much data that we don't know what to do with it. That that whether it be the influx of EOBRs and satellite systems and ELDs and that piece is that we have an opportunity here to take a look at some of these leading indicators and to be able to watch that, to be able to say, okay, we can take all this data and figure out what's next or how that's going to impact my business. That I may have a client in a certain sector of the industry, and now I can, or a certain sector that I can watch that sector and say, oh, new home builds are starting to shrink. So I, as a flatbed carrier, know that building materials may not be my best investment. It may not be where I want to invest my time and my resources, and I need to find another option out there. And I think that's what we're trying to talk about here this week. Is the speakers this morning were talking about how some of these Wall Street folks have Google searches feeding into their analytics. Mm-hmm. So there's this data that's out there that we've never had before as an industry, and we need to find out how to use that and how to make that work for our business. And that's one of the things that we're trying to get our members done.
Yeah, they actually use Twitter feeds. And we actually have, in Sonar, we went out and partnered with a company that does it for hedge funds. And so when Donald Trump tweets about Lockheed, their Lockheed stock trades off, or when a company tweets about something, that information has a lot of value to the financial markets. Right. And I think hopefully we're a part of helping create that narrative in freight and awareness. Well, Tom, I really appreciate you having me here at the Ohio Trucking Association, and look forward to continuing to be a part of the success here at the Ohio Trucking Association.
Great, appreciate the opportunity to talk to you.
Do you know an innovative and disruptive tech company that is changing the freight industry? Or are you that company? Nominations are being accepted now through October 5th for the 2020 Freight Tech 100 Awards. Last year, FreightWaves received more than 500 nominations. The top 25 companies are recognized within the top 100. Winners are chosen by an amazing peer class of industry executives, investors, and academics. Being a member of the FreightWaves Freight Tech 100 and Freight Tech 25 is an amazing marketing and public relations opportunity. Last year's inaugural winners include companies like Tesla, Convoy, J.B. Hunt, Project 44, and Amazon. 2020 winners will be announced at FreightWaves Live Chicago, November 12th and 13th.